Welcome to the Family History Show by Findmypast. Stay tuned. Today we're going to talk about Who Do You Think You Are, your favourite films, and the true story behind if I can get my words out, I've stumbled already. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I promise you the whole thing will be smoother than this intro was, but stay tuned. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Family History Show by Findmypast. If you are new around here, my name is Liam from the social media team here at Findmypast, and as always, it is my pleasure to be here with you on another Friday afternoon. If you were tuning in to our first family history show, which was 2 weeks ago, you'll know that the format of these has changed ever so slightly. Usually it will be myself and Ellie who are kind of co-hosting these. Ellie was rude enough to book a holiday on the week of the second episode. So we're stumbling at the second hurdle here, and it is a very busy time at Findmypast. A lot of holidays, a lot of things going on. So I am riding solo today, but we do have someone in the comments. Jen has been kind enough to donate her time and keep in touch with you all on the comments as well. So be sure to say a big hello to myself, to Jen. Let us know where you're tuning in from, how things are looking here. I hope we all have the sunshine. If it's sunny in Dundee, I'm positive it's sunny everywhere else, because usually I'm the one that's jealous of your weather. So hopefully we all have the sun today. And I can see we do have quite a few sunny days in report already. Shirley over on YouTube was very quick off the mark, 2 whole minutes before I went live. Shirley gave us the weather report. So I'm glad we're all on the same page here. We know what we're looking for on the first couple minutes of these. So Shirley is in sunny Cambridgeshire, could do with some rain. You can keep that sentiment to yourself, I think, Shirley. We've had plenty of rain in Dundee this week, so I will be letting down south take the head on that one, I think. As I say, I'm just getting used to the sunshine, so I don't want any rain just yet. Who else do we have? We've got Andrew, warm, dry day in Lancashire. Nice to hear. We've got another Lancashire resident as well. Jean, thank you for joining us. We've got Daphne from a sunny and hot Somerset. See, we've got the sun here in Dundee, not so much the heat side of things, but we've definitely got the sun side of things. So maybe the heat will follow there. But I mean, it's still 18 degrees according to my computer. So we'll take that, I suppose. We will take that. Gillian from Edinburgh, slightly sunny and overcast. So hopefully it's coming your way. As I say, it's been a nice day here. So hopefully it is at least on its way to you there. Sue Moon in sunny Guildford. We've got Sarah in sunny Wexford. Rosie got the sun as well. She's catching up with Who Do You Think You Are, but giving up as very irritating Mel C. So you'll be glad to know, Rosie, that I'm not talking about Mel C today. I know I did say we were going to do 2 episodes of Who Do You Think You Are in one, but we're going to save some for when Ellie comes back. Ellie will be back in 2 weeks' time, so we'll save that one. I'm only going to talk about last week's one, which is Paddy McGuinness. So you'll be glad to hear that you won't be hearing any more of that if that wasn't your type of thing. And we have Christine from Redondo Beach in California, sunny and lovely. No surprise that it is sunny and lovely in California. I think it's a given. I can't imagine California in any other way as well. So lovely stuff. Thank you all very much for joining us here. As we know, it is the Family History Show. So just a very quick recap for you in case you did miss the original one of these, which was 2 weeks ago now. So we have slightly changed the format of our Friday Live segments. Instead of just Fridays Live every Friday, every second Friday, you'll have myself and Ellie, as I say, who is sadly not here today, but she's got a good reason for being on holiday. So I guess I'll cut her some slack on that front. And we'll be doing the Family History Show. This will be a bit more of a chilled out look at history itself. We'll talk about Who Do You Think You Are? We'll talk about historical films, as we are talking about today, and just a general thing there. And then we're leaving things to the experts. We have got the likes of Jen and Rose, who are experts in their fields and know more than I will ever know about this sort of thing. So they will be doing the expert hour, which will be every other Friday as well. So for example, next week, you should have Rose doing the expert hour as well. So just in case you missed that, a little recap if you were shocked by the Family History Show. Not too much has changed, and hopefully you are all still enjoying the sections as well. So today we are titling The Secret Soldiers of History. So what will that entail? I'm sure some of you have already clocked this in the description there. But we are going to talk about the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which if you tuned in early enough, you will see I made an absolute hash of in the introduction. So I will be keeping my phrasing of that to a minimum there, because I don't know what it was in that intro. And as soon as I hit the live button, I just totally stumbled over the title of that film. So that is a film that's come out quite a while ago, but it is on streaming now. And I watched it myself just the other week. So I thought we would talk a little bit more about the kind of history behind that, the people involved. As I say, we are going to talk about Who Do You Think You Are as well, but it will be last week's episode because we are doing these sessions every 2 weeks. We will be kind of doubling up on the episodes. So next time we do these in 2 weeks' time, we should have 2 episodes to talk about. But as I say, we'll only talk about Paddy McGuinness's one here. We'll save the Spice Girls for later. I'm sure you're all disappointed to hear that I won't be doing my Spice Girls chat again today, but yeah, that will come. And of course, we still have the fan favorite question of the week. And because we are talking about a film based on true historical events, I thought I would ask yourselves, what is your favorite film based on true events? Do you have a favorite film which is based on true events? And I know that might have been a little bit small, so I do have a bigger version to put on screen, which I'll pop on there. So what is your favorite film based on true events? It doesn't necessarily have to be a kind of more historical film like these ones are, a kind of military history angle. It could be anything at all, anything based on true events. I know you always get that at the end of horror films, for example, when you're just about come to terms with how scary it was, and then you get that title on screen that is based on true events, which just makes things 10 times scarier, in my opinion. So whether it's a horror film or it is a historical film or based on a famous event or a more niche one, as this one, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, is, let us know in the comments what your favorite historical film or favorite film based on true events, I should say. But as I said, we are going to kick things off by talking a little bit about Who Do You Think You Are. So as I say, we are going to ask you to cast your minds back to last Thursday when it was comedian presenter Paddy McGuinness who was the subject of the show. So let us know in the comments if you did watch that one, as that would have been a week ago on Thursday. Paddy McGuinness, Who Do You Think You Are? Let us know in the comments what you thought about it, anything that you took away from it, any similarities in your own family tree as well. I think this was quite a big one for me, quite a favourite of mine personally, because I think it was with that sort of Irish connection there and the coming over to Britain. Obviously he was in Northern England, I was in Northern Scotland, my family came from, but I think it is a kind of a relatable story. I think in many ways, I think a lot of people with Irish ancestry, one way or another, one time of history or another, made their way over to Britain, over to Australia, over to America, Canada, whatever it might be. I think it is, like I say, a kind of familiar story. And I think that it was, so far, I was a very big fan of the name who has just escaped me, Vicky McClure. I was a very big fan of Vicky McClure's one from this season, the first episode. As I say, I haven't watched Mel C's one yet. I'll watch that closer to our next session, so it's fresher in the mind. But I think this one, it was kind of my favorite one, and it's kind of favorite for different reasons to the Vicky McClure one, I would say. I think the Vicky McClure one was one of those episodes that led up to the big moment sort of thing when they were over in Taiwan, they were in the mines, and it was a really emotional story and a really personal one to her. And those episodes are always really touching, really great to see as well. And they are, as I say, that real kind of heart-wrenching moment that it comes up to. As I said, when me and Ellie spoke about it 2 weeks ago, I think this is where Who Do You Think You Are annoys me, for lack of a better term, because it lulls you into this kind of false sense of security in a sense. You saw Vicky with her mum, with her aunt, talking about her mum and going around the local area, and then all of a sudden you're in Taiwan, and it's just this real, as I say, gut punch moment almost. But I think Paddy McGuinness's one was different in a sense because it was a totally different thing that they were looking at, as people are saying in the comments as well. Pickles, I think this kind of sums up for me as well, that it was great to see how much it meant to Paddy to learn about his grandparents, especially as he knew so little to begin with. And yeah, I think that was the thing for me, that it wasn't this, sometimes these people have one ancestor or one story that they're looking to kind of follow up on and find out more about. Whereas, as Paddy said himself, he said he'd be surprised if anyone had been on the show before that knew less about his family history than he did. And I think it's the case for a lot of people as well. I know when I was in customer services and speaking to customers on the phone every day, helping them with the research, I think it's always surprising, but no matter how many times you hear it, about how many people maybe don't know their grandparents' name, for example. I think we obviously, as family historians, are blessed in that regards. We can name our 5 times great grandfathers and grandparents and things, but some people, like Paddy McGuinness, didn't know his own grandparents' names. And even when he spoke to his uncle, both Paddy McGuinness's parents are now deceased, so it was one of his mum's brothers that he spoke to, and his mum's brother didn't know the name of their ancestor, of their grandparents as well. And I think Paddy made the comment that no one in the family knows anything about the kind of next generation behind them. And like I say, I think it's easy to forget that a lot of people, that is the case for a lot of people. I think, like I say, when you're a family historian like us, it's always interesting. The further back you go, the further back you go. But some people don't even know their grandparents, let alone their great grandparents, or 3 times, whatever it might be. So I think yeah, to say it was a different one to Vicky McClure, or two other ones as well. And I think, especially being that it was, as I said before, quite a relatable story. I think Paddy McGuinness himself said about being a working class family, and he'd be shocked if there was anything other in the lineage than that. And I think sometimes you think back to like Danny Dyer, for example, him being related to royalty was a shock to everyone, I think, especially Danny Dyer. And it would have been a shock in Paddy McGuinness's one as well. But like he said himself, he was quite sure that his family were going to be working class going back the way. And I think it's always interesting as well to kind of remember the stories that come out of that as well, that just because you are a working class family, he said about the occupations that have gone down, like that can be interesting, knowing how many generations of his family in the maternal side were cleaners, for example, and learning about his ancestors who were involved in the Boer War, involved in making the Spitfires and things. And I think that occupation side of things as well, I thought was interesting too. The real pride that you could see Paddy felt when he was looking at the Spitfire plane and taking the picture of the badge at the nose of the plane from the factory where his grandfather worked and things. I think having pride in that as well, that it's a working class story, he worked in a factory. It might not on the surface seem like there's much, but like Paddy was saying, him and his mates are going to be in the pub having a pint, talking about Spitfire planes, as some men and women are intended to do. Not the kind of thing that they tend to talk about in the pub, I will admit, but some people are into Spitfire planes. And Paddy's got that story now from doing his family history, obviously someone doing his family history perhaps, but from his family history, he's got that kind of personal connection now. So something that you may find yourself talking about every day, he's got that sort of connection to already, which it's a nice thing to think as well, I think. And it's nice seeing someone go from knowing very, very little, like nothing beyond his parents basically, to finding out so much about the generations before his parents as well. And like I said, I think sometimes they're more meaningful than the ones which have the sort of big bang moment that leads up to the big reveal at the end, or the big trip. And obviously, as we've been saying as well, people mentioned in the comments about his Irish side of the family tree as well. I think, as he said, you'd be very shocked if Paddy McGuinness did not have Irish in his side of the family. And lo and behold, he did. They were from Ballina in County Mayo, which, finding that out as well, again, harking back to my days in the customer service team, I know that was a popular thing people wanted to find out as well, when you know that you're Irish, but you don't know where in Ireland or when in Ireland your family were. I think it's a nice thing to find out as well. It's one of those, it's a kind of discovery we can all relate to, I think, as well, no matter where in the world your family are from. I think that kind of moments of discovery kind of always rings true, I think, as well. And yeah, it was just, as I say, a really nice episode, a totally different one to the first episode. As I say, I haven't watched Mel C's yet, so I'll see what that has in store. Me and Elliot will be talking about that in 2 weeks' time. But yeah, I think, as I say, it's a different sort of one, but still a really good one. And as always as well, now that you're watching it as a sort of family historian, it's a totally different show to when I was watching it growing up before I did any of my family history, because now you're watching it and you're thinking, how interesting little tidbits are in between. Like, for example, when they had the 1911 census and the 1921 census, if you were just looking at the census records, you wouldn't have known there was any real changes in the family necessarily. Both parents were still there, the kids were still there. You wouldn't really have known much had changed. But through things like the newspapers, through the workhouse records that the historian had found for him, I think it revealed quite a lot had actually changed in that time, which on the surface, as I say, if you were looking at the censuses alone, you might not have recognized without the context that those, especially newspapers. I know we talk about newspapers every week, so they are always going to be an important one. But obviously things like the workhouse records as well, if like Paddy, you're a very working class family, then unfortunately that is the reality of that time period as well. And it's a sad story. And I think it's hard when you're watching one of these things with sort of modern tinted spectacles on, if you like, that what seems ridiculous back then, like for example, the grandmother taking the grandfather back after what had happened. I'll try and be vague in case anyone else needs to catch up on this, but try and take back. But as the historian said, I mean, the alternative would have been the workhouse, and would have been possibly giving up the children and things. So it's, yeah, you kind of need to adjust how you're looking at these things sometimes. But it's as I say, a really good one. And I think 2 episodes that I've watched, obviously we are on episode 3, but I've only watched the first 2. So 2 episodes in, it is a really good season, I think, so far. And I am looking forward to catching up with Mel C. I can't actually remember who is next, but we do have a blog which we are updating every single week. Jen has posted that in the comments for us. That's got a full breakdown of who is to come. And as each episode passes, we are updating that with a bit of information, with links to the records as well. So be sure to have a look at that as well. As I say, Jen has popped that in the comments for you all too, so you can keep up to date with who's next and what has happened. And especially if you want to view any of the records as well, I know people like myself now, when we're watching this, are going to want to go and kind of analyze things a little bit further. So seeing the 1921 census, for example, is really cool as well. So yeah, keep an eye on the blog and keep an eye on our Friday lives as well. As I say, me and Ellie will be back in 2 weeks to catch up on all things Who Do You Think You Are? And I like that from Jen as well. But modern tinted spectacles, do you like that? I'm glad someone liked that, Jen. I just totally made that up on the spot. I don't know where it came from. Obviously, rose tinted spectacles, modern tinted spectacles, but I'm glad someone liked that. I'm also liking the phrase Liamism. I think that's a good one as well. We're gonna trademark that, and we can keep track of all the totally made up sayings. But you know what I mean? It's made up, but you know what I mean? It's got some sort of meaning in there. But I like that. So I'm glad you enjoyed that, because sometimes I say stuff and it's the kind of thing that I'm going to be close my eyes to go to bed tonight, and I'm just all of a sudden going to have a flashback to that time I said modern tinted spectacles on Fridays live, and I'll be up for the next hour and a half thinking about it. So as I say, I'm glad someone enjoys it, and that's made me a lot better. I'll sleep better tonight knowing that at least someone is enjoying the weird and wonderful things that I say sometimes. So thank you for that. And as I say, we'll trademark Liamism as well. We'll see what else we can come up with as well throughout there, as long as no one clips the intro to this when I totally stumbled over the title of the film, which again I am not going to say until that segment comes, because I will probably just make a mess of it again, but not to worry. So moving swiftly on, but keeping in the theme of films, we do have a question of the week today, which I will pop back on screen for any late joiners. So before we talk about one specific film, I wanted to hear from yourselves about what are your favorite films based on true events. The one that we are going to speak about is based on true events, but I know there are plenty out there, and a lot of things these days, a lot of films seem to be either remakes of films or things that are based on true events. So there is a lot of choice out there, and a lot of things coming in the comments as well that I would not necessarily have remembered myself as well, and some great shouts. We're going to start with one. I'm not sure if this is specifically aimed at me, Daphne, but Braveheart is one of those ones. There's always, I will talk about a little bit more about this in the next segment, but there is always that sort of argument about sort of history versus Hollywood, I think you would call it there, as to what's real and what actually happened versus what happens in the Hollywood film. And yeah, I think Braveheart is one of the main subjects of those discussions, shall we say. But Daphne did follow up with a more serious answer, maybe Belfast. I have not actually seen Belfast myself. I know my sister and my dad went to see it in the cinema when it came out, so I'll need to see that one. I think it is, I'm sure I saw it on one of the streaming services later on, earlier on, sorry. So I'll need to catch up with that, because I've heard it's really good. It's Kenneth Branagh, isn't it? So yeah, it's usually a good film by him. So I'll definitely need to see that one. Because we spoke about Braveheart, we'll go with Sarah's next. Highlander 1986. Wish it was real again. I'm always a big fan of films like that when they're maybe not based on true events, but there's a bit of tongue-in-cheekness in there, shall we say. But the real answer from Sarah is Whiskey Galore, the original version, 1949. So that is a film that some of you may be surprised that I have seen, because it is so old. But growing up, I heard a lot about Whiskey Galore from my dad and my granddad as well. I think it's one of those stories that almost seems too ridiculous to be true. You know, sometimes when you're watching a film and it comes up at the end saying that it is based on true events, kind of thing, and you think that it's, surely this can't be real. And I think that Whiskey Galore is one of them that when my dad would tell me the story growing up, I thought there's no way that would happen. But it did happen, and there is a more modern version of that as well. And I know a lot of people from up northeast of Scotland, where I'm from, were extras in that version of the film as well, which I have actually seen the more modern version of it as well. But it's nothing beats the original, I suppose. Nothing beats the original. And again, in keeping with the sort of more fantasy element side of things, similar to Highlander, Outlander as well. It's from Sue Moon. I know it is a fantasy element, but it does involve factual elements as well. And I'm a real softie for a good romance. I know Outlander is one of my girlfriend's favorites. I think that's kind of like what you say. She's a sucker for a sort of period dramas type thing with a good romance story in there, and the things that obviously they're based on the times, but the actual events themselves might not be entirely accurate. I think there's a place for that as well, especially when you're a history buff as well. I think that's a good kind of balance in there sometimes as well. So I think that's a good shout too. I have just seen a comment about what is the question of the week. I know some hairdressing appointments and various other things have ran over, I've seen, so not to worry, I'll pop that back on screen. We're talking about films based on true events, everyone. Your favorite film based on true events. And we've got a few more good answers to talk about. Jen has gone with Saving Private Ryan. I could watch any day. Saving Private Ryan is one of those films that I saw when I was maybe too young, not too young to see it, but too young to appreciate it. I think I just saw it as another war film in a sense. So it's one I'm going to need to revisit, I think, because as I say, I was very, very young when I first watched it, when it came out, when I first watched it. So yeah, I'm going to need to revisit that one, I think, as well. And a good one from Gillian too, One Life and Story of Nicholas Winton. I know we have done quite a lot of content on that in the past as well. We've had posts on social media. There's a newspaper collection on Findmypast as well, which you should all check out as well. Has some stories of the time from the real life events and the aftermath as well, especially that clip of him on, is it This Is Your Life, or I can't remember the exact name of the show, but one of those type shows when all the children stand up, or the descendants of the children stand up, and he's in the room. I think that's a really kind of heart-wrenching moment as well. So I can imagine the film is similar as well. And we've got more coming in. Keep them coming in. As I say, we'll move on shortly, but we will come back if we've got time and talk more about them, because this is filling up my weekend watch list here. As I say, I just watched the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, so maybe it's a good time to keep the streak rolling as well. And a good one from Ellen as well. Hidden Figures is a good one too. Sort of one of those ones, when you think kind of films based on true events or films based on history, I think you automatically think of things like war films, for example, but there's those hidden figures, that story which is so important and absolutely needs to be told. And having a film based on that is a really good film and a really good shout from Ellen as well. And a lot of shouts for Gettysburg as well. I will admit I haven't actually seen that one or heard of it as well. I know Rita mentioned that too, said there's a lot of great actors. So it'd be interesting to know who's in that one, because I say I've not actually heard of that, I will admit. So I will add it to the list there as well. And maybe we can keep that one there. I'd love to do a watch along as a film on this. I think that would be a good thing to do. If we wouldn't get the rights to stream a film on Facebook, but I think that'd be a really fun thing to do, is just watch a film together on these and kind of have comments running throughout it. And that, I think that'd be a really cool thing. But as I say, I think we would probably land in trouble with 21st Century Fox or similar for broadcasting a film on Facebook. But as I say, it would be a fun thing, and I'm already getting reprimanded for not having seen Gettysburg. So I will add that to the list this weekend, Jen. Don't worry, I will add it to the list. I will even write it down on my notepad so I don't forget to write it there. Hopefully it is on streaming in the UK somewhere, and I can find that one later on. But as I say, there's so many films out there, I can't keep up anymore. I don't even know when this one came out, but I'm going to say that it's totally passed me by, as quite a lot of films do. I will say I'm not always the most up to date when it comes to movies, etc. But I did watch one last weekend, I think I want to say now, which I wanted to talk just a little bit about as well. No one's mentioned this one yet. I think as it came out in April in cinemas, but it is available on Amazon Prime these days. It's on Amazon Prime, so if you do have access to that streaming service, it is on there. I'm sure it'll make its way onto some more streaming services down the line as well. But as I say, it's on Amazon Prime now, so I missed it when it was in cinemas, but I watched it just the other weekend there. And it's a really good film. It's directed by Guy Ritchie, who I'm sure a lot of you will know, especially in the UK, a bit of a legend when it comes to British cinema and things like that. So I'm sure that's a name that rings true. And it also stars Henry Cavill, another British actor who you may know as Superman, I guess, would be his most well-known film, amongst other things. As I say, I'm not always the most up-to-date with films, so I'm sure he's in plenty more films that I just haven't seen, but that's what I've seen him in, is Superman, and now the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. So he is sort of the star of the film, is Henry Cavill, and he plays this gentleman here. This gentleman here is the really cool name, Gustavus Henry March Phillips. March Phillips being double-barreled, or Gus March Phillips, as I think he was kind of more commonly known as well. Gus March Phillips. And as I say, when we're talking about films that are based on real events, there is, as I mentioned, always that argument about a sort of fact versus fiction and history versus Hollywood. One thing that I did see about this, one thing I did notice about this, I should say, when looking up the kind of real story behind it, is how the two people looked. So this is Henry Cavill as Gus March Phillips. If I can flash back there, is there a resemblance there? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's one of those things when someone asks you who you'd want to play in a film, I wouldn't mind Henry Cavill playing me in a film, even though we look nothing alike. So maybe it's just, I think it is intended to be a sort of more exaggerated version of the story from the real events. Obviously, you have to make a film out of it, so there's always going to be some dramatized areas there. But as I say, one dramatized section is the look of the man involved. I think, I don't know when Gus looked like this, but as I say, if anyone wanted to play in a film, Henry Cavill wouldn't be a bad one. So whether he looks like you or not, he's done all right there anyway, I think. And as I say, it's always sort of sensationalized a little bit when it comes to film versus the true story as well. So a little bit about Gustavus, first of all. As I said, Gustavus is a name I've not heard of. Obviously heard Gustavo, but Gustavus is a really cool name. And yeah, one I'm going to take to heart, I think, being a cool name overall. So a little bit about him, first of all. So he was born in London in Wandsworth in 1908. That is his entry on the Civil Birth Index. No surprise that he is the only March Phillips on there, and probably the only Gustavus on that page as well, I would bet, as well, Gustavus Henry. From a personal standpoint, he married Marjorie Stewart in May 1942. Marjorie Stewart was quite a renowned actress by the looks of things. She's in the newspapers as an actress on, I was going to say Broadway, but it's not Broadway. It's the London equivalent of Broadway, which name has just totally escaped me. Someone in the comments can help me out there. Sometimes I press go live and I just think I've been alive for about 5 minutes because I just don't know anything. Sometimes everything just escapes me. But yes, she was quite a renowned actress, a theatre actress by the sounds of things, Marjorie Stewart. As I say, that was in May of 1942. That is their wedding picture from the Tatler newspaper as well. I think speaks to the sort of celebrity of the man almost kind of thing. The Tatler, obviously, quite a highbrow paper of its time as well. So you would have had to have done something for your wedding photo to appear in the Tatler. This would have been just after the events of the film. I think this would have been about 6 months or so after the events that the film covers. And then this is not meant to say 1900 US Census. You can kindly tell I've reused my Elvis Presley slides here, but this is a military announcement for Major Gustavus Henry March Phillips getting a Distinguished Service Order, alongside John Jeffrey Appleyard and Lieutenant Graham Hayes, who was acting captain. The two gentlemen named on that page were also involved in Operation Postmaster, which is the one that the film is based on as well. So that would have been awarded for their efforts in that particular event that the film is based on. And then sadly, he did continue service after the events of the film, or the mission, I should say, that the film is based on. And he would go on to take part in Operation Aquatint in France, which would ultimately, unfortunately, claim his life. Him and a few others were killed or captured during that. I think the plan went awry somewhere and they landed on the wrong part of the beach and were gunned down by German soldiers quite quickly, unfortunately. So from the heroics of his previous mission to sad disaster in the last one, I think. And I think it's a story that kind of rings true to a lot of people with military ancestors as well, and the things that you read about in the newspapers all the time, and obviously the films that we're looking back on, as well as the case may be as well. So that is a clipping from the London Gazette about his will and the executors, and then from the Commonwealth Graves Commission, a picture of his headstone in France as well. And I think I don't really have any military ancestors of my own, so I'm always interested in military headstones, I think, and especially the inscriptions on them as well. And I'm not sure if you can make that out there, but at the bottom of the headstone it says, "A gallant beloved husband, he that loveth, fighteth, runneth, and rejoiceth, he is free." I think that's always nice to see those little inscriptions on there alongside things like the badge of the unit that he was involved in as well. And the unit that he was involved in was the Special Operations Executive, also known as Churchill's Secret Army. So this was a kind of special forces, one of the first kind of special forces units here in the British Army. So it was very much a kind of covert ops kind of thing, not necessarily your usual frontline soldiers. They were kind of doing more of the sort of espionage, the sort of undercover missions as well, including the one that the film is based on, which, as I say, is Operation Postmaster. Much like Who Do You Think You Are? I know some people will probably want to watch this film, so I'll try not go too much detail. But it is based on historical events, so the reading is there if you do want to find out more without having seen the film. But as I say, I would definitely recommend seeing the film as well. But just a kind of brief overview of events that the film is based on. As I say, it's Operation Postmaster that it was based on, which was a mission which took place in January of 1942. And in this, 2 ships were captured. One of them is on screen at the moment, the SS Duchessa d'Aosta. The other one was the Lacombe ship as well. And they were stolen from what was then the Gulf of Spanish Guinea, which would now be Equatorial Guinea. They were German ships that were docked there. And as I say, without going into too much detail, a lot happens in the film. This isn't necessarily a spoiler, but the aim of the mission was for the Special Operations Executive, led by Gustavus Henry March Phillips, to go into these docks and to basically just steal these ships, to kind of hurt the Germans by stealing these ships from the dock of Spain. A spoiler alert, but the mission was successful. The ships were indeed stolen, which didn't really go down too well at the time. As I say, this was a very secretive army, and they weren't really meant to be known too much about. They weren't meant to be doing anything true grandeur sort of thing. They were meant to be kind of in the shadows, if you like, because there's a kind of special operations, covert operations unit there. But because at the time Spain were neutral in the war, it didn't really go down too well with the Spanish that these British soldiers had sort of been in Spain and committed this act on what was at the time a Spanish land, Spanish Guinea. They did threaten to take action against the British at the time, but it wasn't actually, nothing ever happened with that. But it did set quite a precedent, I think, in terms of the war at the time. One of the SOE agents was quoted as saying that it might sort of raise a few eyebrows that Britain are now being shown to disregard the legal formalities of war. As I say, this isn't your usual fighting. This isn't trench warfare or anything like that. It was quite a new thing at the time to have these sort of operations ongoing as well. So it was, yeah, as I say, quite a shocking sort of mission at the time. But because of the kind of nature of the mission, I think this is where the interesting thing with the kind of history versus Hollywood thing comes in. That when you look at an event like this in the newspapers, knowing what we know now about it and what the film shows about the events, it is really interesting to see the newspapers of the time talking about this, and you can see things that people are being accused of carrying this out, and people are denying that this happened, and the Nazis are accusing various people of things. But because it was meant to be such a covert operation, people weren't really meant to know that this unit existed. The newspapers, obviously courtesy of the British government at the time, are denying things. And again, just the kind of language of the newspapers at the time as well. That one on the right says, the Berlin propaganda mischief makers were making the best of the report and claiming it as a fresh British aggression, which was sort of denied at the time, as I say, because it was meant to be a kind of covert operation. You weren't meant to know that this happened, especially, as I say, with there being questions about whether or not this would technically be allowed in the laws of war to commit such an act as well. So I think it's, yeah, quite an interesting a thing to look back on when you see the newspaper reports, the contemporary reports of something like this, which now you know quite a lot about because of the film. But in looking at the film, let's pop that back on screen for something there. In looking into the kind of story behind the film itself is based on a book by Damian Lewis, not the actor Damian Lewis I first thought of there, a well-regarded military historian. The book has I'm probably going to get tongue-tied by this, much like I did the title of the film as well. The book is called Churchill's Secret Warriors, Explosive True Story of Special Forces Desperados of World War II. So as I say, the events of the film are based on true events, but they are taken from this book because it is such a secretive unit. Not much was written about them at the time. Like I showed in the newspaper reports there, you can see that such a daring act that is portrayed so dramatically in the film, you think they would be proud to claim, but because of it, they were definitely kind of playing things down. So there wasn't much written about it at the time, and with it being so secretive, even after the fact as well, there's not a great deal of information out there. So it is heavily based on this book as well. And there is a lot being written about the history versus Hollywood angle of this as well. But I did do some looking into it because as I work for Findmypast now, I can't just enjoy a historical film. Now I'm doubting what actually happened and thinking, is that dramatized? Did that actually happen? But it does seem, because there's such little information about there aren't too many holes to pick in this, really. Obviously, as I say, things are sensationalized. So one of the main gripes was that it made it look like there was such a quick turnaround in the mission, that it just happened in the course of a couple of weeks, but it was actually months of planning leading up to this event, because with being such a daring act, it's not the kind of thing you're going to take lightly. Perhaps it is going to be something that you need a lot of planning in advance as well. And something that was very interesting about this actually was that someone who was involved in the planning of there was the author of the original James Bond films. Fleming was involved in the planning of this mission. I read he's also involved in the planning of events in D-Day and various other things throughout World War II as well. So really interesting. I didn't actually know that. So the film does bring that to light a bit, that Fleming was involved in there. And it is also said as well that I'll flashback to there, that Gustavus Henry March Phillips was actually one of the sort of main inspirations for Fleming's most famous character, James Bond. So whether it was sensationalized or not, it's obviously a man who Fleming held in high regard if he's going to base him on James Bond. So as I said about the likeness between him and Henry Cavill, maybe there's a James Bond actor out there who looks a bit more like Gustavus did. It's obviously changed throughout the years as well. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting one as well. I didn't know about him being involved in the planning of this or of the events of D-Day or anything like that as well. So whether it was sensationalized or entirely accurate, that bit was true. And it was an interesting thing to find out. As I said, I definitely did not know that happened. So it was a really good one. But yeah, that was a whistle-stop tour of the events of the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Hopefully the last time I'll have to say that out loud for a while, because it is tying my tongue for some reason, and I'm not sure why. It's just one of those phrases that I struggled with at the start, and I'm just in my head about. But it's a really good film. As I say, it's available on Amazon Prime. I know Ellie watched it. She recommended it to me. I watched it. And hopefully now some of you will watch it as well. No paid advertisement going on here. But as I say, I would definitely recommend the film, especially as we are talking about historical films today and films based on true events. So that was the most recent one I watched, but courtesy of all of your great recommendations, which have been coming in thick and fast as well. I've got a lot more to talk about as well. So very much looking forward to that. Have a little drink there. See what people are saying. So cool to hear from Daphne. Guy Ritchie lives not too far from me. But sadly, I said that a bit too cheerily because he bought the local airport and priced out the locals, which is never nice to hear. I think you hear that about some celebrities moving to an area and being really ingrained in the community and being just a nice person around the town. But when you're doing something like that, I think it always sours the kind of sensational aspect of a celebrity in the area. So not very nice to hear that one. What else do we have from the film? Kim saying that Jeffrey Appleyard, who was one of the gentlemen who was named on the military honours list that I showed there, was from the same town as my husband's Appleyard family. No connection found to him, but Jeffrey's great-grandmother's brother was the father-in-law of my great-granduncle. That's really cool. I was going to ask if anyone had an ancestral connection to this film. So that's a cool one as well, especially interesting, like say the Appleyard coming from the same town as your husband's Appleyard family, but maybe not a direct connection, but you find a connection nonetheless. That's a really cool one as well. I think it's always nice to hear when you're talking about something like this that someone has that sort of a personal connection to it as well. And Andrew's saying that someone in his one-name study was in charge of the SOE in Greece. He was an archaeologist pre-war and had worked there. It's really cool. I think that's one thing about this unit, the SOE, or the Special Operations Executive, that people were coming from sort of various backgrounds and various skill sets because of the nature of what they were doing was so different to your kind of boots on the ground soldier, if you like, that yeah, people come from a lot of things like archaeologists, for example, and a lot of the men involved in World War II in the SOE went on to work in the City of London, for example. They had sort of finance backgrounds. I think Ian Fleming actually worked in the City of London after the war as well, so that would have been quite similar there as well. And just one as well, Daphne asking if I speak the Gaelic. I don't actually know. I don't speak Gaelic or Gaelic. Funnily enough, I am from the northeast of Scotland originally, but I spent time in Glasgow and I live in Dundee now. So my accent is a bit of a kind of amalgamation of 3 or 4 different Scottish accents. I'm a bit of a chameleon when it comes to that. You put me anywhere, and within a month, I'll have a bit of the twang there. So I quite want to put that to the test one time. Maybe spend a month in Liverpool or something and see if I come out Scouse at the other side of things. But yeah, don't speak any other languages. I did French in high school. I did French on Duolingo as well for a while. But yeah, no other languages. Just a strange mix of Scottish accents there, Daphne. So hopefully it is still legible for you all. Hopefully you can still understand the kind of gist as to what I'm saying there as well. Jen saying, as you come to the US Southeast, that would be an interesting accent with your Scottish. Someone actually read, maybe you can confirm whilst we're talking about fact versus fiction, Jen, that the reason that a lot of the sort of Southerners, the kind of like the far south accents in America are like that. That is because of Scottish migration, that they were quite heavily influenced by the Scottish accent. Someone told me that one time, that, as I say, that sort of real southern accent was partly influenced by Scottish migration. So maybe you can confirm that. As I say, that might just be totally made up, but someone definitely told me that. I haven't just pulled that out. Someone definitely told me that. Sarah asking if I speak Doric. I do actually. If I had stayed up north for much longer, I was there until I was 18, 19. I think my accent probably has changed quite a lot. But yeah, I would have been fluent in Doric by the time there. And it still comes out. My friends always joke that after a few pints, I kind of start going back into the real Northeast Doric accent. So if you ever see me at any event, Sarah, after a few pints, you might hear a little bit of Doric, because it only comes out now after a few pints, apparently. So yeah, and a lot of when I was in Glasgow, used to get bullied for my accent, I would say, being a northerner, or a Chukter, as they would call us there. And people used to say things like, "You only sing when you're speaking," being that Doric sounds so much like singing to someone from Glasgow or someone from the Central Belt. So yeah, definitely a bit of Doric in there. So maybe I'm not sure I'm going to count that as bilingual, but definitely something in there other than just run-of-the-mill amalgamation of Scottish accents. And we will be closing up soon, but we will get this confirmation from Jen. Absolutely a lot of Scottish immigration to the southeast, but a mix of a lot of other cultures as well. French, Acadian, Cajun, and the influence of the enslaved population. So maybe they weren't telling the whole truth there, but maybe part of it was true. That maybe we did play a part in that accent after all. But I think that's something that's fascinating as well, is accents. And as someone who has just moved up and down the country, the way my accent has changed. But I think the sort of history of accents, things like that, I find that really interesting as well. Maybe we'll need to do a session on accents at some point, because I think that's one of those things that comes with migration and immigration, but it's always interesting as well. Even like the influence of, like, people say how heavily the Irish influenced the like Scouse accent, for example, and the places where they went. So yeah, I think that's interesting. And yeah, a session on accents could be fun. We've got 4 different accents in the hosts of the Fridays live team anyway, so maybe that can be a 4-person session. We can all compare notes on accents, because yeah, I'd say we've all got quite different accents. We've obviously got a mix of Scottish, we've got Ellie with the Welsh, Jen American, Rose English. So maybe it'd be a fun session for us all to do a session on accents and the history of there. And Jen, thank you very much for reminding me. Sorry, when I mentioned that the book was written by Damien Lewis, I was watching earlier a really good video by the Imperial War Museum, an interview with Damien Lewis on the events of the film and the more history behind it. So I was a very surface level introduction to those events there. But if you do go ahead and watch the film, or if you are so interested, as I say, I would definitely recommend that video from the Imperial War Museum with Damien Lewis. There's some really good information. Really interesting to hear. He is sort of the authority on the subject. As I say, there's not a great deal about the events themselves. So the book that he's written is sort of seen as the kind of authority on that. So as I say, if you watch the film and you want to know more, or you just want to know more, if you're not interested in watching the film, but that period of history interests you, I would recommend that. And there's a lot of stuff on YouTube about the film as well, which is probably more in-depth than I went there. But as I said, I'm always cautious that spoiling films or maybe going too far. I'll let you make up your own mind, and any film that you watch on our recommendations, you can always let us know how you get on as well. As I say, it will be Rose next week, I believe, and then Ellie and myself, all being well, unless she decides to abandon me again and take another holiday, we'll see. But Rose will be back next week. One of us will be in the comments as well. So if you do watch the film, do let us know in the comments next week how you got on with it, how you liked it. I'll be in the comments, I'm sure. No, I won't actually. I'm on holiday next week. I'm on holiday next week after not being happy with Ellie for being on holiday this week. I'm actually on holiday next Friday, so I will not be in the comments. I do apologize, but someone can catch me up. You can pass on the message there. But then, as I say, you'll have Rose next week. You'll have myself and Ellie the week after that. So you have 2 weeks to catch up on Who Do You Think You Are. We'll probably do 2 episodes in 2 weeks' time. We'll do Mel C and whoever is on the week after that as well. So we'll have a lot to catch up on. in a couple of weeks. So make sure you are keeping up to date with who you think you are, keeping up to date with our blog as well. But that is it from me for another Family History Show, episode 2 of the Family History Show. And so much more to come. As I say, join us next week for the Find My Past Expert Hour with Rose. But for now, thank you all so much for joining me and Jen on another Friday afternoon. Hope you have a lovely weekend wherever you are up to. Hope the weather is good. Hope you're staying safe. Hope you're having fun. Hope you're researching as always. And as I say, I'll be sure to chat to you all very soon. But thank you all very much again. And yeah, have a lovely